and very official there. Sarah Champagne, thank you very much for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about what is the Rotary Peace Fellowship. Sarah is a journalist from Montreal who was a Rotary Peace Fellow taking her master's at the University of North Carolina School of Media and Journalism. She has worked in print, multimedia, and radio. She's worked for Le Devoir here in Quebec and has reported as a freelancer for publications in 15 different countries over 4 continents. This lady gets around. Teaming up with photographers, she's worked on a large project on human migration, and she's been awarded the James Travers Foreign Corresponding Fellowship, which is a major Canadian journalism award, and has been identified as an emerging talent by 2 Quebec journalism federations. She speaks 4 languages, so take your pick, Sarah. You can speak to us in any one of those languages today, and I'll give you the floor now.
Thank you so much, Jim, for introducing me and for inviting me. Also, Glenn. Yeah, so I'm going to speak English. I'm a French speaker, so if you have any question or if something is unclear because of my accent or words that I use, feel free to ask me. And I'm very interested in your stove project, actually, because it's something I've seen everywhere in the world, a lack of chimney to let the smoke out of the houses, especially in Nepal. So I think it's a very useful and interesting project. And I just want to reassure everyone that I'm a journalist, but everything will be off the record today, even though we're recorded. So feel free to ask me any question. I'll go through a presentation. I'll just share my screen right now. Yes, I'll share my second screen. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna cut this off. The little noise, probably my boss texting me. All right. So I'll go through a little bit of the fellowship. I'm not sure how much of the information you already know. It really depends on the club usually. And I've spoken to clubs in the US and in Canada, and in Montreal, I've spoken to another 2 clubs. I know Faye, I see she's connected. I think she's heard me a couple of times. I'm a little bit rusty with English, so we'll go through it slowly. So the Rotary Peace Fellowship, can you see my screen well, or do you see do you see my presentation?
It's good. It's good. And
okay, you see this one. Okay. I just have 2 screens, so I get a little bit mixed up sometimes. So I'll go through a little bit of the fellowship itself, then about my cohort who I studied with in the US between 2018 and 2020. And then I'll speak a little bit of my experience also through the fellowship, and I'm sure you'll have questions. So the Rotary Peace Fellowship exists since 2002. It's been almost 20 years of the fellowship. It focuses on peace. So, you know, peace is one of the 6 areas of focus for the Rotary Foundation. It's a program from the foundation that is centered through 6 different universities. I went to Duke and UNC North Carolina. It's the only joint program in the world for master's degree program. And there are another 4 universities who offers a 2 years master program focusing on peace. So each center has a little bit of a different focus. In Duke UNC, it's more about positive peace, so development. And then we have Bradford, which is more about diplomacy and military operations. Uppsala University is about peace building. So you see each center has different concentration or different area of expertise. There are also 2 universities offering shorter program, professional development certificate. There is one in Thailand and another one in Uganda. And the one in Uganda is really new. It was open in 2020. And I think the foundation has projects for more centers around the world. If I'm not mistaken, there might be one open in the Middle East in the upcoming years. Hopefully, maybe one day in Canada. That would be very, very interesting. And so from this program, each year there are more than 100 fellows that are selected. It's a very competitive process of selection. I'd be happy to help anyone who knows someone who'd like to get into the program or is interested to know more about this selection process. And so it makes it that we are more than 1,300 program alumni. I think this is the number from last year, I mean, from 2020. So if we add the alumni from this year, we are more than 1,400 working in peace and development in more than 115 countries. So it's really in the whole world. And I remember talking to Rotarians in North Carolina, one of the major donor to a district there, and he was saying, you know, you are like agents of peace. You go to a university, you're all together for 2 years, and then most people go back to their country of origin and then work in peace and development. So in a large sense. Among all these alumni, more than a third work in NGOs. So it can be non-governmental organizations, small and big. Some people put up their own foundation. Some people work in philanthropy, in corporate social responsibilities with companies, with enterprise, with businesses. Some people also work for the government. I know, for example, one fellow who came to North Carolina, he was from Peru, and then he went back and he began advising in counter drugs policy in Peru. Some people go into teaching, other people will go in advanced degree, for example, PhD in North Carolina or PhD in England. Some people work for the UN in different agencies. We had one of the fellow from Colombia who has worked for the food program across the world in humanitarian context. Another one was working against the Ebola epidemic. So it's really, and then you get the 2% who are journalists. So I was the only journalist in the cohort, which makes it even more interesting because, you know, in these days, it's really important to go out of our social bubble or professional bubble and get to meet people. And I think also it's what is Rotary about, you know, making friendship through connection and making peace through connection. And so one of the very important aspect of the program, it's not only that we have classes about peace and development together with our cohort, but it's also that you get to be in this network, you get to live with those people, and I mean, not in the same house, but you get to see the world through their eyes. And so one of the things I had underestimated when I was leaving for North Carolina is that I would never see the world map ever the same again, because I've traveled extensively for my work, but it's very different when you get to talk about peace, you know, sit down and study mechanisms, study peace building, study history with people who's gone through it, who's lived through it. So just in this picture, so that was the first year I was in North Carolina. That was 2018, 2019. You can see we are 20 different people, and I think 15 countries are represented. Just to give you an idea, he was from Pakistan, Ethiopia, Ukraine, India, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Australia, Mali, Vietnam, India also, Colombia, Italy, we have Serbia, Lebanon, Israel, and Nepal. So that's a lot of people from different corners of the world. And obviously the program is really demanding, so we don't have a lot of time, you know, to just chit chat, but having classes together really allows us to learn from each other. So that was just the first year. And then the second year, we didn't have an official picture because the pandemic kept us from having that official picture. But just to give you another idea, that was the second cohort on the second year. Each year there is a peace conference. There is an annual peace conference in North Carolina, and I know some Rotarians from Canada who go down there and listen to the different researches that we've been working on for 2 years. And so last year when I graduated in May 2020, so a year ago, it was remote, it was online, obviously for COVID reasons. And so we had the chance to really share our research and our applied field experience. And it's all online, so I could share a link if you're interested in some of the work and the research. I think the one from this year also is online, so it's also a good opportunity to learn more about the researches. And there's not a specific area for everyone, because some people were studying public health, other people were studying data for refugees welcoming. She was studying development mechanism for connection. How can access to internet in remote places in the world can foster more enterprising, more little businesses to pop up. So yeah, so it's there is a great diversity of topics there. Just to give you another idea of some of the people in the cohort, she's a lingvo from Vietnam, and she is from a very humble background, and she would tell us this story about her father. Her father was a bomb sawyer, and so the first time she shared that history, I had to I had to think, what's a bomb sawyer? So I googled it to understand what was the translation of it, but it was literally a bomb sawyer. So there was the war in Vietnam for a long time, and her dad would go and try to cut the remains of bombs to sell the scraps of metal. And so it was a very risky and dangerous business, but the whole goal was just to put food on the table for his family. And so she was very smart, and she got sponsored by someone in Vietnam back in the days to go to school, and she's blossomed into this young, very independent-minded lady who has already founded her own organization to work with children. And she graduated from Duke University from a Master of International Development Policy and a year ago, and she went back to Vietnam, and now she works for an investment company. She helps the company to make sure they meet a range of criteria for corporate social responsibility and investment in philanthropy. And so she works on that side of the investment funds. And she was quite something. You should go and see her talk last year. She was really interesting. This is Yared from Ethiopia. He also graduated from Duke in May 2020, and he was hired by a firm in the US. It's called Chemetrica. It's based in Colorado, and he's trying to build a model of prediction for refugees. So when a catastrophe or a conflict and anything else that can produce refugees in the world strikes, there are certain variables or certain factors that you can put into an equation. I'm summarizing, obviously. He would probably think it's a shortcut to predict where they will go and what will their needs be. And so it helps in planning the humanitarian response in that case. And so he worked for the Ethiopian government before coming back to school. I don't think I mentioned this, but you need at least 5 years of experience to apply. So we're all mid-career professionals who brings a little bit of field work and field experience, and also going back to academia. And he really found the focus or the topic he wanted to focus for the rest of his life, which is migration and refugees. And so he was hired right away after graduating. I think it's a really good success story. And so when I was preparing to go to North Carolina, I mentioned that it's almost a 2 years process to get selected. You first apply with the club, and then you are interviewed by the district, and you have to produce a certain number of essays to make sure you are competent and you are selected for the good reasons. And so while preparing all of this, I was thinking, okay, where can I make a difference? I have 7 years of experience in journalism before I applied to this fellowship. And I wanted to make sure that, you put your career on pause and you go back to school for 2 years. You are far from your professional realm or from your friends or your family. So you have to make it worth it. And I thought, okay, I'm a journalist. We write a lot about conflict as journalists, not only international conflict, but also local conflict. We see a lot of things through the lens of conflict. And so I thought, okay, as a journalist, what I could do to make my contribution to more peaceful world would be maybe to change my lens, to change the way I go at things. And I'm not saying, I should write only about good news or peaceful news, but in every conflict there is also a possibility for rehabilitation. There is also a possibility for reconciliation. So not just writing about the conflict, but also writing about the possibilities and the opportunities in the conflict, I think was my idea when I applied for the fellowship. And so I come from a very tiny village on the St. Lawrence River, and this is me reading a newspaper. So maybe it was my destiny to become a journalist. But I first studied in international studies. I studied Latin American politics. I studied history during my undergrad at Université de Montréal. And I like to say that in my village, there were more cows than humans. And maybe it's a detail, but I'm from a very small place where most people don't travel so much. And I mention it because I think it's not where you are born, but it's where you want to go and it's where you're going. So that's why I mentioned it. And then I studied journalism after my undergrad. I did a certificate, and then I traveled to 15 countries to report. This is Cameroon. This is in Mexico. This is Guatemala, Nepal after the 2015 earthquake. I went to Benin and West Africa, and this is when I was studying my maths for the fellowship. So people should know that it's very competitive. I mentioned it, but it's not just 2 years of pause. It's really work that you're asked for, and you asked also to make a contribution to Rotary. So it's really, I think I felt like I was more part of the family of the great family of Rotary, and I had not realized how much connection it would give me and how much opportunities to share with people that are not from my social or professional background. And so I think it's being part of the family. I want to mention this project just quickly because that was when I really decided to apply to the Rotary Peace Fellowship. I was doing a project on remittances. So the remittances, you probably know what they are. It's the little money that the migrants send back to their country of origin every week or every month. And some people do it for decades after migrating. So we had these examples from Mexico, a man who's been here for 20 years, but he still sent, let's say, $100 to his mom back to Mexico every week or every month. And it looks like a private economy. It's people exchanging money between themselves, friend or family, close people to them usually. But taken together, it's more than 3 times the amount of money in public official aid to development. So the flow of money represents a very important flow of money to countries in development, emerging countries. So we thought, okay, how can we harness this power? And a lot of specialists at the World Bank and in every bank actually are working on this flow of money going back to countries of origin. And we could think, oh, but this money is going away from Canada and to other countries. But I call it do-it-yourself development. People take their own destiny into their own hands, and then they help their family back home or back to their country of origin. And so I did this project in Mexico, Haiti, and Turkey with Syrian refugees. And I thought, okay, I want to tell this story of immigrants here in Canada who already are part of the society. They are contributing to the society. They pay their taxes through their jobs because they have this job that allows them to send back money home. And I also wanted to tell this story about Syrian refugees because it was a time when Trudeau had announced that we would have 25,000 Syrian refugees in Canada, and some people were unsure of whether it was relevant or whether it was enough or too much. There was this debate going on, and I thought, okay, if people could sit down with this family that I met in Turkey that were waiting to be sponsored to come to Canada, I think they would change their mind. So sharing a meal with someone, you get to know them, you get to know their motivations, and she was my age, and she was just on the verge of her own professional life. She was on the verge of getting a better job and advancement in her job. She used to work in a hospital facility as a lab technician, and the family had to flee. So And on the very same day that we published their story, which is this one here, there was also the Muslim ban in the US. So the first Muslim ban, as you see, it's in 2017. And on that night, there was a shooting at the Quebec mosque. So, and this is all on the front page, all on the same front page of Le Devoir. These three things happened. And I thought, okay, this idea that I had, that if I can tell the story of someone, maybe it can promote dialogue, it can foster understanding. And so I thought, okay, I'm applying to the fellowship, and this is the question I will bring to the table on my side. So how can stories promote dialogue? And I know sometimes telling stories, it can sound a little bit almost childish, oh, we tell stories to our children when they go to sleep, or we tell stories with friends when having dinner. But I think it's a fundamental human reflex. It's a fundamental human needs and a mean of communication that has always been present and very important. If you look at the Bible or Torah, I mean, all the sacred books are stories from which you can extract lessons. And I think as journalists, we do think stories can bring something, but they're not always the stories that can promote dialogue. So yes, telling stories and insisting on the importance of stories, and on the other side, telling stories that can promote dialogue. And I wrote here the 4-way test because as soon as I got accepted as a fellow, I realized that the 4-way test that Rotarians use in their meetings is also useful for a journalist. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Those are questions that I could be asking myself, and that could gear me into the way of promoting dialogue. So with this question, during the masters, we have 2 years of masters, and between those 2 years, we have an applied field experience to do. And I had always wanted to go to Colombia. Colombia has been at war for 50 years, and a lot of people say they've been at war with themselves because it was really groups against groups, government against guerrilla. And so it was not a foreign enemy. It was really at war with itself. And I think it was a really good time to go to Colombia. I was there in the summer of 2019, and the peace had been signed just 3 years earlier. So the peace was signed between the government and the larger group of guerrilla, the FARC, in 2016. And then I was there 3 years later, when there were a lot of programs for peace building and reconciliation, but also just really basic reconstruction. And so I followed during this summer deminers. So it was a team that would go across forests, mountains, field, wherever it was, they would go and try to find the landmines that were still underground in Colombia, because it's a country where there are a lot of landmines still. So I know my time is almost up. So I'm just going to go quickly over some of the people I met in Colombia, just to, I think this is a very good example that you see a peace treaty that's been signed on TV, and it's all grand and pompous, and people are dressed in white. And then you see in reality, it's people going centimeters by centimeters to find the landmines underground and make their country safer. And so I thought it was such a good metaphor of the transformation of Colombia. It was all young people in the country. And so this is a camp for demining. And then I also met peasants. I met people from, really isolated places in the countryside. That it was a meeting they had they wanted to build a road. I met people who were fighting the government maybe 10 years ago and lost their limbs. But I also met people who were from the government, the army or the police, who also lost their limbs. So, there's no winner when you lose your 2 legs in a war. So I went deep in the countryside, but I also went to see power. This is a picture of me in the presidential palace, because I met one special advisor for peace to the president. I'm not sure if he still has that charge now, but then he was in charge of coca eradication. He was in charge of demining. He was in charge of new economic development, obviously with a huge team. But so I went to see him and ask questions. And one of the stories that really stayed with me until this day was the story of this young man, Ferley Vargas. And I think it's the story I like to tell to say how stories can promote dialogue and can inspire us to transform not only ourselves, but the world around us. Ferley was enrolled in the guerrilla. So he was enrolled in this far left group when he was 13 years old. He lived in an area with only guerrilla. So it was almost you enroll or you go or you have to go from your village. So he enrolled, he had lost his father, so he had no real guide in his life. And so it's not to excuse him or anything, but is it really a decision that you can make when you're 13 years old? And so he stayed in the guerrilla for about 5 years, and then he fled the guerrilla, and he was taken in charge by the government, and he could study. He lived with a sponsored family, they call it. And so it was all, he was taken charge by the government for his rehabilitation. And he became a journalist. He became a cameraman who works for one of the largest TV channel in Colombia. And so I met him while we were both going to the same meeting for landowners. I'm not sure, terratenientes. There was this group of farmers who were meeting, and we were going down the same road. And this is where he told me his story. And I wrote an article about him. A former guerrilla changes his lens, and he becomes, the path that Colombia could also follow. And I'm still in touch with him, and he's still reporting for the TV channel called Caracol. And that's it. I think I've spoken a lot. I've said a lot of things. If you have questions about whether the fellowship or my own experience, I'd be happy to answer. I think Rotarians usually have the best questions of all audiences. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Do me a favor and stop sharing the screen, and then we'll get into the question period here. One of the first, I'm going to start with the first question, and that's, how did you hear about the fellowship?
Yeah, so one of my colleagues, a photographer, has done the fellowship when it was in California. There was another center in California. I think it lasted until 26 or 28. The first program that was set had a California anthem, and he did it. So it's a photographer whose name is Michel Huneau. He works a lot about migrations, and we've done this Remittances Project together. So he really pushed me to apply, and he encouraged me to apply. Yes.
Okay. Glenn Shepard, you had a question you'd like to ask? Gotta wake him up. Okay, the question that Glenn had was, are there any criteria about the age of fellows in the program? Any minimums or maximums?
Yeah, so I think the minimum would probably, there's no minimum or maximum officially, but I would say because you need at least 5 years of experience in the field or in a job, well, it makes that if you're under 25, I don't think you could apply. And then it's a master's program, so people tend to not be above 40, I would say. Some people come with their family. It's rarer. There are less people doing it, but some people do come with their family. And so you have to know, you're going back to school. It's gonna take 2 years, so it's not. I don't think there's no limit, but at the same time, not a lot of people who are settled would do it. I think.
What does the fellowship, when you get the fellowship, what does it cover in terms of your costs?
Yeah, sure. I had an extra slide on this. So it covers all the tuition. It covers the health insurance. As you know, it's very expensive in the US for health. It covers basic needs. So not as if you would get a salary, it's more a stipend. So it gives you a certain amount every month to make sure you can buy food and you can buy books for school and you can rent your apartment. So it's a minimum wage, I would say, but it covers all expenses related to the fellowship for sure. It covers also the applied field experience. It gives you a flight ticket. You have to present, you have to plan for your summer and say, I'm going to be working for this organization and this is what I'm going to do. And then you present a budget and they reimburse you the cost of it. So it covers most of your needs for those 2 years.
Oh, wonderful. Is the entire thing financed by Rotary, or are there non-governmental agencies or governments that kick in?
So to my understanding, it's the foundation that really helps you. And then I think each center has a different agreement with the university that they work with. For example, Duke and UNC, it's two different universities. And I think they had an agreement that we would pay in-state tuition. So it's not as expensive as if we were foreign, but it's a little bit more expensive as if we were American, if you want. So I'm not aware of all the agreements, but yeah, that's the general understanding. And then also the university provides, UNC is a public university, so we had access to all the resources that other students had. So yes, we were a little bit supported by the state of North Carolina, I would say.
Okay. Here's one. Obviously the people that are in this fellowship and at this program presumably have a commitment to peace. Do they have any opinions or any comments on the commitment to peace on the part of governments and people around the world?
That's a very good question, and it's a tricky question. I like the style. So I've come to try to not answer directly that type of question, and I think it's part of the answer. When I would go in Rotary clubs, or I also gave some speeches for other organizations in North Carolina, and I was asked my opinion about Trump because I was there when Trump was president. And I think it's not my place to comment on local politics. If you are a foreigner, you will not go to demonstration. It's in lots of places, it's against the law for foreigners to demonstrate against the government. So obviously it was not my place to do that either. Obviously, people have opinions, but I think the fellows are generally selected to make sure there is a wide variety of opinions, and it's not just left or right, and it's not just blue or red if you're in the US. It's like in Rotary clubs. And one of the things I find fascinating about going to meetings is that in a very polarized time in the US, I was there sitting with people from both sides, from people who had very different opinions, but they had agreed to disagree. And so a little bit before the pandemic, we had this training. We had this, it was a 2 days training. It was about dialogue. How can you have a dialogue and enriching conversation with someone who has very different opinions than you? And I think it's part of the experience, getting to be in touch with people who don't think like you, who might disagree with you, and how can you still build that bridge? And as a journalist, I think it's one of the main lessons, of one of the main takeaway that I got from this experience in North Carolina, really. So I don't think I've answered your question, but yes.
You went around it very, very neatly. I'm very impressed.
And so we had Christians, we had Muslims, we had Buddhists, we had atheists, and so we were also represented in a religious way, I would say, as well.
Okay. Last question that I have here is, you mentioned that your takeaway, or let's say your goal, was how can stories promote dialogue? How are you bringing that forward now? How are you doing that?
Yeah. I didn't take the time to say it, but usually when you're at the slide number 14 in a presentation. You know, when you're close to the end, people expect this huge conclusion and this big takeaway that I could use, you know, to just use the same takeaway for everything. But I think writing stories that can promote dialogue is being on a path. And it's better to not have that answer and be searching for it all my life than having the answer already and thinking, okay, this is what I'm going to do. So right now, what I'm trying to do is writing stories of transformation, like the one in Colombia. I work for Le Devoir. I went back to working for Le Devoir for so many reasons. I've worked a little bit for the Texas Tribune last summer in Austin. They're based in Texas. And they offered me a job, but you know, with the pandemic and the context, it was not for me a good option. And I think I want to write for my own community, for Quebec and Canada. And so how I see that I can bring this aspect or this philosophy to journalism is really writing about stories of transformation. Some people would call it redemption. You know, some people would say someone who has try to do something better for themselves and for their community. That's one thing. I also try to obviously always write the different version of a conflict. When we arrived in North Carolina, we had this, they gave us this t-shirt. There are always two versions of the same story. And I tend to think there are not only two, there are thousands. So as a journalist, if I can talk to more people about the same thing, the better. And it doesn't mean I have to call flat earthers. I mean, if you're talking about an accident in the manufacturer, you have to talk to the boss. You have to talk to CNSST. You have to talk to the worker themselves. And so try to come to a place where you're not just accusing people of something, but trying to understand better. And also, I think writing positive stories. So I'm working on a story for this weekend in Le Devoir, which is about nursing homes, préposé. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how it's
Attendance.
You can say that. Sorry?
An attendant.
Yeah, attendance. And, you know, a lot of people have been trained and formed this year as attendants for nursing homes. And so, and we've had this idea of nursing homes that, you know, they're really bad places and people go there and they die because of COVID. And so I'm trying to see the other side of it and saying there are so many people who have changed their own life by putting themselves in service, putting service above self. And so that's the story now I'm looking to tell.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Rod, are you, I know you've been cut off a couple of times here. Are you still around?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
This most frustrating morning. I don't know how many times I've had to restart the computer. I've been locked out, this and that and the other.
So would you care to, as long as
thank you very much, Sarah, for your presentation. Real knowledge is membership here. Normally we have a professional thanker in the form of David Franklin. And indeed, we also perhaps have another member, Nick Zielinski, who could be better capable of thanking these youth membership things. But it's great to hear exactly what the fellowship, Peace Fellowship is all about. And indeed, the experience you have to have before you enroll in it, because many of our programs, you know, start at a very much earlier age. And obviously this one is something that you have to have worked hard at before you start thinking about it. So I think it was very helpful for us. And thank you for attending. And I do apologize for the fact that I missed some of the presentation because I kept turning on and off. But thank you again, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
I have to say, when I heard that you were going to be the speaker today, I was going, Peace Fellowship.
I think I'm having trouble again.
What's that kind of thing? And I would be willing to bet that an awful lot of people have learned a lot today about another focus that Rotary has, that and a program that we really didn't know about.
Yeah, I'm aware of this. So invite me whenever you want to talk about the fellowship. I'd be happy to add more elements to my presentation. And I also can share more information. I'll put my email address. I'm sorry, I used to put it in my presentation, but I've changed it. I'm gonna put my email address. So if you have any other follow-up questions or things you'd like to share, I'd be happy to stay in touch.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome to stay for the end of the meeting, or if you need to go off, feel free. Again, thanks from everybody.